So that's what this conference is about. And it wouldn't have happened without tremendous support and help from George and the steering group playing a part. I'll talk about that in a second. So it's a collaboration between the Playing a Part Autistic Girls project funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, the UK's Participatory Autism Research Collective, which Damian leads, chairs, and the International Autism Ethics Network. And we've got quite a few representatives from that network today as well. So thank you to all those organisations for support, particularly the AHRC and the Autism Ethics Network who funded the event. And thanks also to the School of Arts for facilities and support. You'll find more about what we're all doing over the next 2 days. On the train home yesterday, I was alarmed not to have received any communications about the conference from the conference team that I'd left working here. So I sent a message and I had this reply. Bags are all done, name badges printed, various signs, maps and arrows all printed, parking permits sorted and sent out, accommodation cross-checked and popped into confirmation emails, hand dryers turned off, paper towels organised, catering confirmed, last minute changes, stewards briefed and raring to go, filming notices printed and gathering consent organised and signing off from the Unicom's team. So I just want to start by acknowledging the incredible efforts of this extraordinary team. It couldn't happen without them. I'm just mentioning some individuals. Chloe, she's here at the moment. I think she's sorting out.
She's outside.
She's sorting out a problem with the website. Hannah, who a lot of you would have heard from, where's Hannah? She's outside dealing with the crisis as well. Dita, who will be with us later. Krysia, George, Sammy, actually also Melissa, and Helen Cara, who you're going to be hearing quite a lot from today, who has helped me to try to design a conference with a difference and been very generous with her time and support. So thank you to Helen. So this is our first conference of this kind. It's a series of 3 annual events as part of the project. We've tried to learn from the Autism Arts Festival, which is why you've got lots of nice things in your bag. Thank you, Shaun, you don't have to plagiarise, I call it creative borrowing. All at Scope, which I did last year, so I pitched a few ideas from that as well. And the other autistic-led events that I've experienced, such as yesterday. But it's not going to be perfect, so please give us feedback and be understanding, because we're trying to do things differently. As John said yesterday, we want conversation, not confrontation, so please bear that in mind. We're experimenting with an app. Thank you to Chloe for her extraordinary efforts to generate that. When I found out that you could do these last week and came back and said, I've got another good idea, and everyone was horrified. So please try it out and let us know how it works. It is just an experiment, and if you think it's good, then we'll pay money to get rid of the adverts and kind of do a better one next time. So we've got lightning talks, open space workshops, a creative exhibition, and we've tried to create space for conversations and different kinds of responses. Feel free to participate or to experience the work in other ways. If you want to take breaks, that's fine. We've got 2 seminars upstairs. One is the quiet space, an autistic quiet space. The other one is an autistic space where you can talk. We're going to call it a
chatty autistic
space. A non-quiet discussion space. That's GS5 and GS6. There will be films occasionally in GS6 as we go through the programme. So I think that's pretty much it. There's also, if you haven't seen it, do look at our outdoor labyrinth. And if you want a bit of time at lunchtime or you want to walk for some reflection, it's a really, really beautiful place to go. It's well signposted. And if you want to know where it is, talk to us, we can point you in the right direction. It's just down past Elliott College on that little pathway towards Canterbury. Right, fire exits aside, actually I have to confess I've been working here for a very, very, very long time. I didn't quite know. I've just discovered fire exits I didn't know about. But anyway, there's not going to be a fire alarm, so if there is a fire, it is for real, and you have to get out. And that sign would appear to indicate that you run, but I'm told that you don't run. You get out in an orderly fashion through that door there, or you turn here, and there's a fire exit clearly marked there. It is very confusing because it looks as if that's the fire exit, and a natural instinct would go that way, not that way. But anyway, that's okay. So the senior technicians in here, that's good because I probably can do that very well. Right, filming. We are filming the event, so please make sure you've indicated if you don't wish to be filmed. We're going to be focusing very much on the speakers for the presentations, but if you're at all concerned, sit towards the back of the afro or the back of the Lumley, and then we'll know. And if you're wearing a green wristband, that will help us with editing to keep out. However, we're documenting the event because we really want to collect stories, experiences and responses. We've supported a lot of autistic people to come here, and we want your voices to be heard. So if you've got stories to tell or perspectives to bring, then our filmmakers, so we've got Bruce and Jack, where's Jack gone? You can go and say to them, I've got something to say, or I want to tell you my story, and they will very happily talk to you. Or if you'd like to talk to them with George and I and have a conversation, or if you're having a really good conversation and you think it should be filmed, then you just direct yourself to the cameras, if you are willing to do that. We would love to hear those stories. We've also given everyone a journal. I hope you like them. So we've done this because they're yours to keep. You don't have to send them back to us, don't worry. I do that to my students, but not to you. But what we'd like you to do is to use them for reflection, thoughts, stories, and if there is anything that you then thought that would be nice to share, take a photograph of it and send it to us, or type it up. We'd love to have them. We'll feature anything we get on the website, and we've got interest from publishers in publishing something at the end of the project that will be a collection of stories from autistic people and participants in the project. So without further ado, I'm going to invite George, she's chair of the Playing Part Steering Group, to say a few words, and then Chris will part will complete the introduction.
Thank you. Question. You mentioned the Loud and Quiet seminar being upstairs. I don't see it on the timetable. Where does that fit in with? Unless it's me missing it.
That's something you can access at any time. So if you want to take some time out, you can go to the quiet room or go to the chatty room.
Very good. Thank you.
It's Sam Hall.
Okay, you've stolen my introduction. I'm George Watts. I'm autistic and I'm chair of the steering group for the Playing Part project. Just a few really quick notices. I know we're very aware of time. The conference hashtag is Inside Out Autism, so please do use that. We've got a range of ways you can get in touch with us. So you can ask questions in the Q&A sessions, but you can also write things down on post-it notes you've got in your bag, or you can tweet it, and we've got people looking at that, and we're going to try and get your questions and comments to the right people. Also, just to be aware, we've asked everyone to use identity first language, so that's autistic person rather than person with autism. And we're going to be using clap-laws, so get your jazz hands ready. And really just to make everyone aware that we've got huge diversity of expertise in the room. We've got such a range of people. We've got artists, we've got academics, we've got lots of autistic people, we've got people who are wonderful combinations of all of those. And really just asking everyone to be respectful, so to be very mindful in what they're saying and the impact that can have on people who have very different perspectives, and also to be open-minded so that we can all learn from each other today. And I think that's me.
Okay, so as Nikki's already introduced me, I'm Dr Shaun Waldock. I'm a PhD student in Kent, and I'm also going to be with Damien and one of our colleagues starting up some park activities here. Just do you speak up a bit? I'm not very loud. Okay. So I'm Dr Shaun Waldock. I'm a PhD student here. Is that better, volume-wise? A bit bigger? Is there a microphone about?
There is.
Okay, I'll shout then. So we're starting Park here at Kent, hopefully in the next academic year. I'm going to be one of the, hopefully, co-conveners of that. And for anyone who doesn't know a bit about Park, I've got a 2-minute excerpt from the website that I've picked from Damian. So the Participatory Autism Research Collective was set up to bring autistic people, including scholars and activists, together with early career researchers and practitioners who work with autistic people, and our aim is to build a community network where those who wish to see more significant involvement of autistic people in autism research can share knowledge and expertise. And we're hoping to have a first meeting in the next few months. I'm supposed to have a piece of paper where you can write down your emails, but it's actually still in my bag at the moment. So what I'll do is I'll get it out and I'll pop it on the desk here. Or if you want to email me, if that's easier for you, my email is kew48@kent.ac.uk, or I'll be tweeting a lot so you'll be able to see my gorgeous face. I hope George retweets me and you can send me a message on Twitter. I think that's me done.
Any other questions? Excellent.
So now we have Damian buying his book.
Yes, my book. There's a couple of copies for sale in the foyer. There's also some free copies of a good practice guide that's been put together by the National Autistic Task Force, which is entirely autistic-led. And if you want to talk to me about that project and that guide, please do so in one of the breaks. But there's free copies and leaflets about it in the foyer. So I'm going to be talking about participatory research, perspectives, issues and ethics. This one? No.
You just nod. So, as people have already been introduced, that's me as a young kid before they brought in health and safety regulations. And yeah, I'm chair of the part group. So, obtaining the views of disabled people has become a general requirement in policy and legislation, both nationally and internationally. But often there's a lack of involvement and representation in organisations that speak for autistic people. And we all know some of those. And there's this growing conflict between the autistic voice and the discourse of dysfunctional computing. Dysfunction, deficiency, independence. Is the clicker on? Yes, it is. And made a mistake there. There was a report a few years back which was called A Future Made Together. I often put shapes by mistake because of the project which came after it, which was the Shaping Autism Research UK project. This was a fairly small project, but a series of seminars which brought together, like today, many people from different disciplines, autistic parents, researchers and so on. And this came from after the Future Made Together report, which showed quite a disparity between the kind of autism research which gets funded and the kind of autism research that autistic people and families want to see. And the Shaping Autism Research seminar series, one of the main areas which built up through each one was around participation. And the last two seminars of that series we had organised around well-being and participation anyway. So it kind of naturally ran to that as well. And last year there was a paper that was, the main lead author was Sue Fletcher-Watson, but lots of us were co-authors, that reported on that, and participation was a major key factor highlighted. Go on then. And participation and having one's voice heard is often seen generally as an essential requirement for individual well-being and autonomy. But for autistic people, there's a number of barriers to participation in wider social life and in research, and often excluded from contributing towards decisions that directly affect our lives, which has led many advocacy groups, of course, to rally behind the slogan, "Nothing about us without us." And for me, as someone with a background that started in sociology as a discipline, there's a number of concepts which relate to voice and participation in research. And in sociological debate,
issues around insider and outsider perspectives have been debated for more than half a century. And many qualitative research projects with certain theoretical backgrounds talk about the need to talk of researcher positionality and there not being a view from nowhere, like an objective scientific viewpoint, which isn't involved in the research topic in some way. There was also concepts such as situated knowledge, which came from feminist theory, and Nancy Schaubroeck and others. This was about knowledge which is situated in the experience of one's own life. So topics like autoethnography and things could be said to have these roots as well. And with ideas around neurodiversity and what I used to talk about as disposition, which is another sociological usage from Bourdieu and others, all of these ideas are taking lived experience as a key factor. And before any of them, phenomenological, nice long word, philosophy was doing similar. That's just a nice picture of me and my brother from the late 70s. Why I put it in there. Darcy and Huxtable. And neurodiversity, for anyone who doesn't know by now, at its most simplest is just a brute fact as it's put forward. All brains are different to some extent and develop idiosyncrasies, including so-called typical ones, or within those boundaries, whatever they may be. So I shouldn't really need to go over this. I'll move on. But through aims and objectives in research come into controversy as to what this research is aiming for. So a lot of work is critiqued by the autistic community as being too directed by normativity, being acting less autistic and so on. All about behavioural outcomes, social skills and so on. I often bring up this page here, which has been shared quite widely. And this was created by Mel Baggs, the American autistic activist, to deal with a particularly difficult support worker. And quite an ingenious communication page where you can use the voice app to say, build up, from please leave me alone now, right up that top right hand corner. And if you look at the things created by autistic people and the aims they serve and why, they could be quite at odds sometimes with the so-called interventions which are done for us or onto us. And how to research these areas in a meaningful way. I'm not against scientific trials at all, and I think for particular reasons they are needed. But we also need other forms of research, building collaborative communities of practice, qualitative accounts of what impact these have, and for these to be taken a bit more seriously, both in funding and influence. I think there's several reasons for that. A few years ago, I talked about interactional expertise between autistic and non-autistic people. Gaining expertise in what it is to be autistic, at least in interactional terms, so to understand the language of the autistic community, if you like. would take immersion in the culture and practices of autistic people. It is questionable to what extent such immersion is even possible by non-autistic people. It's certainly doubtful that many established researchers have made the effort to do so. Some have, and hats off to them, but they are in a minority, I find. And I often use this quote from the late Donna Williams: right from the start, from the time someone came up with the word autism, the condition has been judged from the outside by its appearances and not from the inside according to how it is experienced. And this old model of participation, the ladder of participation, you can see in much autism research historically is barely got across consultation, informing or placation. And it's kind of a tokenistic level of participation. And the stuff that does get beyond that and above that tends to be small-scale, low-funded pilot projects and so on. It's not the most invested. This is an old quote from myself and Light Moon. In order for debates on the education of autistic people, because I was talking about education in this article, to move forward, it's argued here that researchers must move beyond the objectifying gaze of the scientific tradition and be truly participatory with those they seek to produce knowledge about. This isn't to throw out the scientific tradition, it's to take the participatory agenda seriously, and that can cause issues with scientific methodology and goals for various reasons, which I'll get to later. And autistic people have, until more recently, have rarely been in the role as researcher and traditionally seen as passive subjects of research. What an old colleague of mine called the glass subheading: it was rarely autistic people who were writing the interpretation of findings and conclusions of research articles. And the amount of research and where it goes and who's it on, it's not just types of research and what their aims are and methodology, it's also the topics. As Ari Neyman said years ago, only less than 1% were looking at the needs of adults, and this is still an under-researched area. So we need collaboration in setting the research agenda, the design and development of strategies and methodology, and to avoid tokenism. But there are potential barriers to inclusion in research: cognitive and linguistic demands, representativeness, especially for people with more severe learning disabilities, such as my son. Often proxy informants are used, but the representativeness of these, at least, are questionable. Things drawn from pictures and schedules may not be the child's own views. And getting informed consent is a huge problem that holds a lot of research back. It is very important to take into consideration, obviously. But there are opportunities to use other mediums of communication and research aids, if you like. I've listed many things which will be talked about in the next couple of days: film, photography, art, and so on. And participatory research I see more as an ethos rather than any prescribed set of methods that one has to follow and tick off. So it could mean a range of approaches, but the main objective is the power of the researcher being ceded over to the participant. And most importantly at the end there, interpreting the findings and breaking through that glass subhead. And some writers go beyond this. One of the main writers around the social model of disability, Colin Barnes, talked about emancipatory research. And by definition, you said it should be judged mainly on its ability to empower disabled people through the process, but whether that's achievable is a highly contentious issue. A few years back, Autistica funded a project by James Lind Alliance to look at the main objectives for research for put all the stakeholders, as it were, together. And they came up with a top 10. Last year at their research conference, I talked about how all of these objectives could be seen from a sociological lens, as it were. But all of them would, whatever discipline you're coming from, to me would have more ethical and epistemological integrity if they had a greater participatory agenda within projects around them, from mental health, communication, certainly social care, interventions to reduce anxiety. Without the autistic voice being part of that, you're likely to get things badly wrong, potentially make things worse. Even in terms of supporting and educating parents and family members. Diagnostic criteria, employment, sensory issues. Without autistic input into these topics, how far are people really going to get? And despite the low amounts of funding, this agenda has been on the rise and is growing. All of these projects I've listed here, I've had some involvement in personally, just me and several others. Ranging in their level of participation, I'd say, possibly getting better towards the end of the list there as you go along. But these over the years have all made efforts to increase participation. And some projects I've worked on, there was no history, no tradition of doing this at all. So I've done projects in Italy and Greece where having an autistic person on the project team had never been done before. And we got this initial sort of steps moving. So to me, any step in that direction towards that ideal and that ethos is potentially a beneficial step. The part group's already been introduced, so I'll put through this. And it was set up a few years back with these as the main objectives, addressing the isolation felt by autistic researchers, ensure that research carried out can be found and used, raise the reputation of participatory methods in the field, and also to occasionally critically comment on autism research, which doesn't really match up to our standards. And so to do this, we wanted to encourage autistic people starting out in research, provide feedback and support, and hold meetings and events. We have that website, cartautism.co.uk, so it's quite easy to find. And we've had events in London, Birmingham, Sheffield, Nottingham, Glasgow, and now Kent, and getting things started here. We've had conference streams and partnered other events, such as Scottish Autism, Lancaster Disability Conference, and so on. And we've already also held conferences of our own at places like London South Bank University. We've also had publications with journals and a partnership with Pavilion Press. There's another cheap plug for my book. So Pavilion Press and us are working together to get more publications by autistic authors out there, practitioners. So I'll conclude with this comment from a few years back. Traditional methods of consulting and working in partnership may not always be effective. New avenues for connection may need to be sought, However, when collaborative ventures are pursued, when people on the autism spectrum feel included and empowered, the ability to live as one chooses greatly increases. There are remaining difficulties and opportunities, though, I think, for partners. And one of the difficulties is greater participation of those with learning disabilities or other marginalised groups within our community. I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. So a question I'll just leave you with is what research you would like to see. So to ponder that one as the day progresses. And I'll shut up now and move on to the...
Thank you. And now we have... Oh yes, there's the sheet of paper to get involved in.
I've got my email and if you'd rather tweet rather than leave your stuff.
And then I'm going to pass over to Katrien, who convenes the Autism Ethics Network.
Remind me if I forget, if you can hear me. So I'm a philosopher based in Antwerp, and I will say a little bit about philosophy, and especially moral philosophy, because that's my domain. I'm a moral philosopher. And I'll start. So I'll explain the title later on. I'll first say something about collective research network that we have set up with the basis in Antwerp, but it's international and also Cancer is involved. And the network is called the Autism Ethics Network. And we have a website, autismethics.com, where you can find a mission here. It's bringing together the social sciences and humanities for a better understanding of autism. And the word understanding is used in a position or contrary to the word of explanation or explaining. So our feeling was that a lot of autism research has the aim of explaining autism, and therefore often turns to medical or the exact sciences, medical understandings of autism. Well, we want a social understanding of autism, and a more humane understanding, or more moral understanding. These are things that I will come back to. So we are an international platform, and we believe that a transdisciplinary and inclusive approach is necessary for ethical approach to autism and autistic individuals, and strive to surpass reductionist frames of thinking. We welcome researchers, there's a line you see there, but from a lot of disciplines, including also psychiatry, the arts, anthropology, philosophy, sociology, literature studies, it's in the cultural studies. But this list is not exhaustive. And of course also people living on autism spectrum are very welcome to come. We are being funded since 2 years by the Belgian funding for research foundation. And Nikki and Kent is part of it. We have a partner in Columbia University in New York, that's a sociologist, and we have partners in Utrecht, they are moral philosophers, and then there are psychiatrists from Leuven, I don't know how to translate pedagogical, educational studies, I would say from Ghent, and then philosophers from Leuven, and social studies and literature studies. Leo is here as well, she will talk tomorrow from Leuven and Antwerp. So there's a big group of disciplines working, having workshops, having conversations on autism, and exchanging our research. One of the outcomes of the network has been this article, The Ethics of Autism. It was published last year, and it was written together with next. Yeah, this is Ingrid Robeens from Utrecht, Christine Hens from Antwerp, and myself. We wrote it together. And it's a list of what we think are ethical challenges in autism research. We have a list of 7, we made a list of 7 clusters of ethical challenges or moral challenges. And I will discuss 2 of them today. So the two sections that I wrote, to be honest, that these are things that I want to talk about with you. So they are philosophical. From the 3 authors, I think I'm the most armchair philosopher.
They can't hear you.
They can't hear me? Okay, sorry. Good that you tell me. So I would say that I'm mostly doing armchair philosophy, so I'm not involved in empirical or participatory research, although I endorse that, but I'm not doing it myself. But even from the armchair, some things are look to me problematic. Some things that philosophers write are problematic on moral grounds and philosophical grounds. And I will talk about these issues. So my title is Philosophers on Autism, Problems with Knowledge and Empathy. It's an ambiguous title because it can be read in 2 ways, and I intend it to be ambiguous. Philosophers, or some philosophers, think that autistic people or autistic individuals have a problem with empathy and with knowledge, and knowledge acquirement. But when you read how they write about autistic people, I often have the feeling that the philosophers themselves have a problem. They have a problem with knowledge of what autism involves, what it is, what the lived experience of it, and a problem with being empathic, having empathy for and with autistic experiences, autistic individuals. So that's my standpoint. So that's my starting point. And now I will explain this by giving evidence, by giving quotes, by showing why these philosophers write what they write and what's wrong with it. So some of the quotes might be offensive. I mean, I find it offensive. I think many of you will think the same. And yet these philosophers don't realize the problem. They don't think they do anything wrong. Well, let's see how it goes. So philosophers think, these are all moral philosophers. They're interested in autism and autistic individuals because they use them, or they cite them as case studies, as arguments in overall theories about what moral responsibility is, what moral agency is, what it means to be a moral agent. And then they point towards capacities like empathy. Having empathy as a basic capacity that you need to be a moral agent, or that you need to be able to hold someone responsible of being held responsible for your actions. And because of their reported or alleged difficulties with mind reading and empathy, autistic individuals are often featured as case studies, as examples in arguments that have various aims. So they have the aim. There's an article by Thomas Schwelmer, a German moral philosopher, who wants to show that empathy is constitutive of morality. And his argument is that that's the best way to explain why autistic individuals sometimes have difficulty acting or being, not acting as, but being held responsible for their actions. And that's because they have empathy, so that's perfect explanation. And then Janet Kennett, that's a different argument. She uses autistic individuals as being full-fledged moral agents, but lacking empathy. So that means that moral theories who think that empathy is a crucial capacity for being moral, they must be wrong, because otherwise it doesn't make sense that autistic individuals are moral agents. So she uses autistic individuals as counter-arguments, counter-examples that undermine moral theories and make empathy central mode of moral theories. She thinks that must be wrong. And then there are theorists, moral philosophers, who reject theories of moral responsibility because they do not accept autistic individuals. So some theories of moral responsibility demand too much of people, of autistic individuals, individuals who lack certain capacities like empathy, they say. And then there are other theorists who do the opposite, who say, well, we should reject theories of moral responsibility when they exclude autistic individuals from being fully morally responsible. So all things are going on there. A very influential theory of moral responsibility in philosophy is the reactive attitude theory. So it's a theory held by Peter Strawson, who says that holding someone, so the question is, what does it mean to hold someone responsible? When do we do that? When is it appropriate to hold someone responsible for his or her actions? And Peter Strawson said, well, the question is not a theoretical question, it's a practical question. We just look at how we live together, how we do that. And we have reactive attitudes, that's the word that he points towards one another. We resent people when they betray us. We are grateful when they help us. We are indignated when they treat each other horribly. So these are all emotions that we as human beings are born with, or we just have them. And what is essential to these reactive attitudes is that they are natural human reactions to the good or ill will or indifference of others towards us, as displayed in their attitudes and actions. And you can see here why some people think that for autistic individuals it might be difficult to have reactive attitudes, because it requires that you read the intentions in the action, that you see what the other person intends, whether it's good-willed or ill-willed towards you or towards someone else. And so there are people who think, well, for autistic individuals it is difficult. And a variation of this reactive attitude theory is the conversation theory, who says that, well, being a moral agent is being partner in a moral conversation. It's picking up the rules of morality, picking up the norms, and understanding one's own actions as expressing having a certain meaning. So a morally responsible agent must be able to act as if her actions were morally significant bearers of meaning among communicating agents. So the moral game as a communication game. And insofar as autistic individuals have communicative difficulties, they will have moral difficulties. It follows. But this is problematic, of course, to draw such inferences. Sometimes philosophers do this with the best intentions. So they do it to protect autistic individuals. For instance, Ken Richmond has an autistic son, and when he writes about autistic individuals, and how they have difficulties being full members of a moral community, he's thinking of his son, I'm pretty sure, and he means well. So what he writes is, because accessing the experience of the other, so because of reading the ill will or goodwill in the other person, will be harder for autists than for neurotypicals, and because there is a duty to engage with others as a moral agent when possible, the reactive attitude theories demand more of autists even though they already are at a disadvantage, and this is unjust. So it's done to protect his son and others like his son from too demanding claims on them. But it has a detrimental effect. It excludes people from the moral community. So it excludes autistic individuals from the moral community, and it does so in a deeply problematic way. I quote not Richmond now, but someone else, Schramme. And there, I was really, really offended by it when I read it, and I should talk about this with you. I haven't done so yet, and I still need to write articles about this to get armchair philosophers more aware of the impact of what they write. And so, what this philosopher writes is, so empathy is an element of a set of capacities that together enable human beings to become social and moral beings. This particular capacity capacity of empathy is impaired in autistic individuals and can be linked to deficiencies in moral agency. But then how extreme the message is, because then it follows the capacity for empathy seems constitutive in that it is necessary to bring us to see other people as vulnerable beings. So the upshot is that autistic individuals do not see other people as vulnerable beings. And so they are really outside of the moral game altogether, which is just outrageous. That cannot be what he wants to say, but he says it, he writes it. Here again, a more nuanced approach by Nathan Stout, who also has the intention, I think, to protect autistic individuals. And he focuses on high-functioning autism. And he's in a discussion with this conversation theory of morality, of the moral game being a conversation. And so he says, while it might seem that high-functioning autistic individuals are perfectly capable of having a moral conversation, we must be aware how difficult it is for them. It's more difficult for them than for people who are not on the spectrum, who are not autistic. And so the conversation in which these autistic individuals engage is lacking something important. So it is similar to the linguistic conversation that an individual who has been transplanted from her native country to a region where she does not speak the indigenous language might engage with. Such an individual might, after time, learn enough of the language to function in her new environment, and yet lack an understanding of the norms governing the language and those who speak it. So there's a certain competence, a certain capacity, but not a full capacity. So hers would be a functional language, not a truly embodied language. Agents with high-functioning autism, I have argued, and they engage in a moral responsibility exchange that is functional in just this way. So it's functional, it's superficial in a way. It's the external behavior, but not the internal norm appropriation. They are able to reliably make moral judgments, experience moral emotions, and engage in social interactions. And yet, autistic individuals are closed off from the rest of the moral community in important ways. It's said that I think the meaning here is that they lack something and we must pity them for it, or we must be compassionate about it. But it also reads as they are closed off, we exclude them. So it's a double message there. They are closed off from the rest of the moral community in important ways as a result of their relative deficiency in cognitive empathy, as well as the way in which they access their own emotional lives. They do refer to autistic experience themselves, Campbell Brandon, all of them. Richmond, Schramme, Stout, they all cite and the Brennan and this phrase where she feels like an anthropologist on Mars. This, of course, is one, I mean, it's a testimony, it must be true for some people, but it's always used as representative of all autistic individuals, which I think is quite. They also refer to scientific models by the theory of mind theory as the right explanation of features of autistic psychology. And they identify empathy with mind reading because, of course, theory of mind is about mind reading. It's not about empathy in general. It's about, insofar as it has something right. 2 minutes? Yeah. It's only about mind reading. It's not about empathy. It's about ascribing mental states to another person. It's not about feeling with him. And whether the theory of mind, whether mind reading is necessary, is in order to be a moral agent, it's questionable. Empathy is something else, and whether it can be identified is different. There's also a problem with knowledge attribution. So I said problems with empathy, problems with knowledge. These are quotes not by philosophers, but by autism researchers. It's an old quote, so it's from 1991, sorry. And she questions their autistic testimonies because of the theory of mind theory. So if you have difficulty describing mental states to others, it will also be difficult to describe it to yourself. So how reliable are your self-reports? a recent study by Karin Jongsma shows the same problem. It's really a catch-22. So she studies patient organizations, as she calls it, and she says, well, we notice, we see that this effect, so being affected by dementia or autism, she studies those organizations, causes distrust in having the capacity to know in a twofold way. It is assumed that those who can present themselves are not affected enough to present valuable insights into the condition, and those who have difficulties to express themselves into their condition are excluded because of their affectedness. So we're never taken seriously. That's nothing. I'll skip this and say a little more about the way forward. What should we do? So I think there are theoretical resources for philosophers to give a more nuanced and fair hearing to autistic testimonies. And these autistic testimonies, they tell us that they do have empathy. These individuals do have empathy, and they do have moral capacities, and they do hold morally responsible. And they do have self-knowledge and want to give us an idea of what it is to have autistic experiences. And there are models to bring this into account. So there are models in philosophy of mind that focus, or that change the focus from mind reading to mind shaping. And mind shaping is a collective business. So that's one, so the collective approach to mind shaping. And then there is an approach in epistemology that was already mentioned by Damian when he referred to feminist standpoint epistemology. That they draw attention to how knowledge is being made, how that is a practice, making knowledge. We are involved with that. And so I want to mention this book by Dr Flicker. She is an epistemologist, and she coined the term epistemic injustice. She used it to describe the injustice being done to women and other minority groups. It has been picked up and applied in disability studies as well, where it's very useful, I think. It's a very good book. It's from 2007, and there's a lot in there that we can use to show what goes wrong when certain testimonies are not accepted, are not taken up. And she distinguishes two kinds of injustice, and I think both are applicable to what happens with autistic individuals. They suffer testimonial injustice. This is injustice when you're not being believed because of prejudice. So it occurs, testimonial injustice occurs, but prejudice causes the hearer to give deflated level of credibility to speakers' work. That's what Franziska Haffley does. That's what she inflicts on the individual. She doesn't believe because of his or her autism. And the hermeneutical injustice is the injustice that we suffer when we don't have the words to describe what we feel. So the injustice of having some significant area of one's social experience obscured from collective understanding, owing to a prejudice in a collective hermeneutical resource. And the two go together, of course. So Flicker's notion of hermeneutical injustice assumes that people's resources for making sense of our worlds can become discriminatory due to the asymmetrical ability of some groups to affect the ways in which a given society makes sense of the world. So that's exactly what happens. If a certain group is not believed, not listened to, then their experiences will not be taken up in a collective enterprise of knowledge making, of knowledge shaping. And the solution, according to Flicker, is that, well, she's criticized for that, and I had a follow-up slide, but I'll leave it there. But her solution, and I think she's right. In the end, it's virtue. It's really a moral solution. And the solution is in a moral attitude, an attitude of being open-minded, being better listeners, and being less prejudiced. When we listen to one another and realize that sometimes we do injustice by not taking it serious, by not making certain experiences part of what it is to be a human being and live in our social world. The naivete, I think, is an unfair accusation, and I might talk about it later if you want to know more about it. But so we end with an ethical note, and that's what I want to do. Because I think in autism research, and especially in how moral philosophers talk about autism, there's a deep moral